Chapter 2. New Sights. The next day, they found Glamour still asleep from yesterday's events and dreaming about one of her past encounters. But I like it when you do that, Mr. Banana. Suffice to say, Glamour had experienced some rather interesting moments. She was brought back to the real world when the branch she was resting on jolted upwards, groaning over but rudely awakened. Still rolled around on the metal surface, trying to catch a few more minutes of sleep. Her brain then finished booting up and reminded her that the branches were not made of metal. Quickly standing up, she immediately took in her surroundings. What she saw made her out a loud wail of despair. She was stuck inside a cage wagon and was being hauled into through Ambleton. Somehow the ponies of Ambleton have captured her and were now moistly parading her through town. What made it worse that besides the ponies pulling her prison, a large mob had surrounded the wagon and were walking around with it. Every pony Glamour met eyes with shot her a nasty look or shouted insults at her. Glamour wondered how in the question did she manage to stay asleep until now. She knew she was a heavy sleeper, but not waking up to witness being captured by a town of angry ponies was ridiculous. Glamour let out a yelp and fell back on the metal floor when the cage wagon gave another jolt from hitting the bump in the road. Instead of getting back up, she let out a whimper and curled up into a ball, trying to black out all the noise and spiteful faces around her. As she tried to think of some way to escape her predicament, Glamour was surprised when her personal prison parade marched out of Ambleton. Eventually, they end up near a cliff not too far from town. A short makeshift platform was erected near the edge, and on top it was a podium. Again, Glamour was wondering if there was something wrong with her. She had scouted the surrounding area while gathering information on oak and syrup, and she could not believe she had somehow managed to see this huge landmark. When the cage opened, Glamour tried to fly out as a last desperate attempt as freedom, but the ponies were upon her instantly. Before she knew it, she was placed on a platform with her legs chained together, her wings bound by a rope, and a magic surrounding ring slipped onto her horn. Glamour was barely able to hear her own grip as she looked out at the clamoring cloud. It was like one giant blur of scowling faces directly at her. Alright, quiet down, everybody. A stallion wearing a black robe and powdering wig said as he got behind a podium set up next to Glamour. Let's make this quick so that we can all go home. Would the victims please come forth? From the crowd, Sia walked up to the platform. The glare she gave Glamour was a bane of all husbands, but just one effect on any living creature. Syrup, where is your husband? He he cannot make it today. Is it because this change occurred to him? Actually, it's because I might have gone a bit overboard last night when I gave him the talk. Can I please go back in the cage? No, you may not, changeling. The judge replied by turning his attention to the crowd. Oak would not be able to attend due to his unfortunate circumstances. We, but we shall go on right ahead with the trial. Now, this stranger is accused of impersonating one of our town citizens, Oak Tree, and attempting to feed off his wife, Syrup. The, the stranger is also accused of littering and causing a ruckus when it tried to escape. Are there any other crimes that we should know of? It also broke our bedroom window. Glamour was, Syrup said. Glamour was moderately dazed both for the sounds and the sudden drop in oxygen from the huge, undefined gas from the crowd. The judge shook his head. Such villainy Based on the overwhelming witnesses' accounts, I found this changeling guilty for all crimes. Sir, but by our all-time custom, you may have the honor of administering its punishment since it has done you the most wrong. The grin Seb had on his face made Glimmer wonder how her husband managed to survive for so long. Can we talk this about it? This Glimmer asked as she tried to hobble away from the menacing man walking towards her. To her surprise, Seb stopped. She brought up a hoof to her chin as she thought deeply to herself. All right, I suppose we can. Oh my god, what is that? Glemma turned around and to see what Sib was pointing at behind her. She looked all around the area, but she could not see anything worth nothing. What? I didn't see any. Ah! Two hooves bucked Glemma's behind, and she was sent screaming up the edge. Unable to free her wings, using her magic, or even fail her hooves in terror, Glamour continued to yell. It got louder when she saw the bottom was riddled with hundreds or thousands of tall, jagged rocks, while it would easily give her enough holes to make Queen Chrysalis jealous. The whole dying part kind of a put of a damper on that dream. With nothing she could do to avoid the rapidly approaching rocket, she would shut her eyes and wait for the end. But instantly, of being appointed dismay, she felt her body land on the grass. Unfortunately, falling face first onto any surface still hurts a lot. Falling onto her back, Glamour clutched her muscle as she groaned. Opening her eyes, she saw a glimpse of branch that she slept on high above her. It was all a dream, Glamour mumbled. When how popular her true self was with angry mobs, her mind was had inadvertently made up a few unpleasant scenarios if she didn't get captured. As a result, nightmares like the one she had just popped up every now and then. She heard the pony's princess of the night help those plagued by bad dreams, but Glamour figured out that service did not apply to those who invaded her kingdom. Glamour remained on the ground for a few moments, waiting for a pain to away, but deciding that she should probably do something produced today. With a big yawn, she stretched out her body, working out all kinds from awkward bed and fall. When her body was fully awake and her face was not itching anymore, she got up and took flight. Glamour flew around a bit until she stopped in a familiar grouping of trees. Finding one with a couple scratches marks on it, she flew up to a hole in the trunk and pulled out a saddlebag. She quickly took up a map of the equestrian and let out a heavy sigh, wearing a sigh as her magic drew close over Albleton, the same mark that she could seen on many other towns on the map. After the failed invasion of Kentala, Glamour, along with the other number of changelings, had become unhappy with the Queen Chrysalis' rule and eventually left the hive to live on their own two hopes of finding a better life. Since then, Glamour has survived by using old tried and true method of personalizing a pony's loved one. However, now that many ponies were aware of changelings, it had become harder for her to maintain her disguise, and being chased out of town in front of one or another was becoming more and more frequent. She winced there was a more reliable, safer way to feed, but until she did find one, she would have to keep on making to do a traditional changing method. Scanning her map, Glemma found when she saw the one only variable places near Philadelphia and Manhattan. She knew they were both bigger places that small towns was she targeted, and other than invading Canton, she had not been to a big city like them, where it was easier to blend in with the crowd. She heard that they were all sorts of troubles and annoyance. She winced she could recall more of the specified but she fell asleep during the lesson. Still, no with no other alternatives, she had to try her luck and adapt to the new place. Her eyes went back and forth between the two cities, seeing that both places were about the same distance away and equal intimidating. Unable to figure out which place she would travel to, she resorted to a tried and true ancient ritual to decide her truth. Eee mine mo, catch a dragon by his claw. If it howls, run for your life. Mine mo. And with her hoofs stomping on Manehattan, Glamour's next destination was set. Glamour went back to her bag, replacing her map with a hoof full of photographs. They were all pictures of ponies, but she was not stalking them. They were pictures of ponies that she used to help her stalk other ponies. Like all other changelings, Glamour was unable to disguise herself as any pony, but changing into another pony that she could see required the least magic amount of magic. Due to a difficulty of gaining love, conservation was vi- virtual. Of course, with no actual pony nearby, having a stolen photo of a pony was a decent enough substitute. Picking out a photo, Glamour concentrating on the pony in the picture. Her horn started to glow green, and a second layer of ring of fire enveloped her. She quickly pulled out a compact mirror from her bag, and its reflection that was a Pegasus mare instead of a changeling. After doubly checking herself to make sure her tan fur, green mane, and a cue mic of a nutmeg matched the photo, Glamour packed up all her stuff and put on her saddlebag. With a beat of her non-feather wings, she flew through a hole in the canopy, and she was soon way to the big city of Manhattan. If there was only one thing Glamour hated about traveling, it was having to do it alone. Her body had pretty much been flying on autopilot for the past few hours since all she had to do was follow the coastline up to Manhattan. While the trip so far had been incident-free, it was it was also incredibly boring. She let her mind wander to the various subjects such as what Manhattan would may be like or how some housewives could be terrifying, but they were all just brief respites. Running out of things to keep her mind occupied, she decides to do a mental checklist for when she arrived. The first thing to do was to explore the city and get familiar with the new environment. She, since she was not used to big cities, it would not double take a long time to get used to the place. She will she will also have to find a suitable place to spend her nights. Impersonating other ponies did not exactly pay well. She would be hard to press to pay anything for than free. In a pinch, she could always make do when sleeping on a cloud. The last thing she was to find a target that pretty much involved either finding a couple or getting information from other ponies. So guess that the part should be easy with more ponies around. Glamour's attention was brought back to the flight path when she caught a glimpse of something in the ocean. Guessing that it was her ocean, she put on a burst of speed as the city came into view. Her jaw dropped when she got closer to take in full sight in Manhattan. The bustling city was nothing like she had imagined, but entirely on a island off the coast. The city was completely covered with a labyrinth of paved streets, a swarm of metal skyscrapers straight high above her. A, a quick glance showed that the only ways of the city is for non-flyers were either by a boat or a train that used on the bridge connecting to the mainland. Not too far away from the port, Glamour felt a pang of fear when she saw a statue of a pony that was as tall as a building. Seeing the torch in her hoof and the spiky crown on the head. Glamour guessed there was some sort of monument to angry mobbing when she attempted to turn around right then and there. However, since it was possible that it stood for something completely different, she swallowed her fear and into the city limits. She had never seen so many ponies in one place before. Hordes of ponies flooded the streets, and every one of them seems to be in the rush. They were practically shoulder to shoulder as they pushed their way through the crowd. There were also lanes for carriages, but there were so many of them moving out. There were traffic jams all over the place. It took like a while before she found an opening in the crowd to land, but as soon as she did, she was swept up by the tide. Watch it, lady! Move out of the way! Hey, I'm kind of not a pony. I'm not that kind of pony. Glamour yelped as she was pushed and shoved around. She tried to move in any direction, but she was helpless among the sea of bodies. After stumbling around onto the streets beyond, nearly run over by a carriage, she went back in the air. Unfortunately, flying was not too much for her. While she was not being shoved around, she still had to be careful of many other Pegasi who had the same idea as her. Her attention became entirely forced on dodging speeding Pegasi and avoiding mid-air collisions. They were further complicated by a multitude of skyscrapers the limit the air amount of airspace. After about an hour or so of braving the crowds, an exhausting Glamour noticed the traffic was finally starting to line up. Unnoticed to her, she was just surviving her first rush hour. While she was finally able to proceed at her own pace, Glamour was still lost and unsure how she be looking for and ended up wandering aimlessly around the confusing city, no longer having to concentrate on avoiding being trampled or crashing. She was able to take a better look at her surroundings. The streets were still pretty crowded, but they were nowhere near as bad as before. She noticed quite she noticed that quite a lot of ponies was wearing some form of clothing, and judging by many clothing shops what she passed, she concluded that fashion was a pretty big deal in the city. There was as many so many as massive buildings of them even bigger than the castle in Camelot, and everywhere she looked, she saw some sort of colorful sign or advertisement. It was also amazing, just overwhelming at the same time. She could see why other changers were wary of the big city. After crossing what she probably of 100th Street, she noticed a horde of ponies had congregated in the front of a large building down the block. Letting her curiosity guide her, she flew over to the scene. As she got closer, she detected traces of adoration in the air. Adoration was a lesser form of love, and in sufficient amounts, it could also feed a changeling. This only made Glimmer even more curious to find out what's going on. Landing on the edge of the crowd, Glimmer went over to a random mare in a simple dress and asked her, "Excuse me, what's everybody lining up for?" The mare scoffed. Then what are you even doing here if you don't know? I was just passing by and saw the crowd. Whatever. If you have to know, there's a fashion show rehearsal that is about to start. Glimmer, Glamour tilted her head in confusion. She already guessed fashion was a popular thing in Manhattan, but she did not expect what it could get this much attention. Not, Nevertheless, the fashion show was something showing adoration among the ponies, and she had to investigate it. What's so great about a fashion show, and why not wait for the actual fashion show? Seriously? The pony gave her a look of disbelief. These shows tells us what's going to be in, and wearing the right stuff can make you super popular. I just have to know what's going on with hot to this season before any pony else. She let out a huff. Too bad. It's gonna be tough with those guys. Glenn looked to where the mare was directing her gaze and saw a couple of security guards were p- posted at the door. Any pony who approached them were turned away, but there were only one or two that were somehow able to get in afterwards. Why is there so much security for a fashion show? Just then, a screaming stallion was sent out flying for the doors of the building and landed in a dumpster across the street. And don't, and don't you let me catch you trying to flirt with the models again, or I'll break every bone in your body! An angry male voice shouted before the doors were slammed shut. Never mind, Glamour mumbled. Anyways, how do you get in? The man let out a loud exasperation sigh. We just ask the security guards themselves instead of stop bothering me? Glamour rolled her eyes and left the man to do just that. While she knew it was like a long shot, she could still try and see if the guards would let her in. If anything, she might be able to find out what's more about the show. Flying over the crowd got her some scornful looks, but she ignored them and went up to the entrance. I, Glenn agreed, one of the guards. What? The stallion did not even look at her. Can I go in? No. Why not? The guard sighed before explaining in a bored tone. Only ponies with a passes may attend. Would you believe me if I left my pass at home? Oh, sure. Go right ahead. Glamour's eyes widened. Really? No. Glamour gave the guard a deadpan face. Unless you have a pass, you're not getting in through this door. Now get going before I get mad. Fine. With a huff, Glamour flew away. So far, Manehattan was quickly becoming the worst place, and so she had infuriated. The city was just a massive metal maze. But what irked her was the most part of the ponies that had such nasty dispositions. She was used to terrible treatment in her real form, but the fake her should have at least fared better. The only thing urging her was one of the curiosity of the fashion show and the joy it seemed to generate. As soon as she was out of sight of the crowd, she made a circle and went back to the building. The guard only said that she could not get through the front door. For a changeling, not being able to use the front door was usually just a mere inconvenience. They learn how to look or even make their own entrances. Since making their own entrances usually involve a lot of screaming and third degree burns, she opted to look for one at the time being. Glamour immediately found a back door when she arrived in the alley before the building behind the building, but as expected, it was locked. She checked if any ponies were around, and when none were found, her changing horn appeared under her head in a plume of immediate fire. She tried to picking the lock with her magic, but it seemed that the hotel had invested in magic-resistant locks. When all she could do was to jiggle the doorknob, with a sigh, she could look around for any other alternatives and picked up when she knows a vent about a story up the building. Given her how popular events were, it was a pretty common method to place them high up to prevent intruders. Ponies and unicorns would not be able to reach that high, and Pegasi usually do not have means to pry open the gate. Fortunately, Glamour was not any of those. While changes were not as agile to fly as a Pegasus or as strong in magic as unicorns, the ability to use both as once certainly made up for. As after storing her saddlebag behind some trash, she flew up to the grate and popped it open. With a flash of magic, Glamour grinned and made her way in. There was not first time sneaking into through a vent. She knew how to proceed slowly and carefully to muffle her movements. But as she crawled through the mirror tunnel, she could not get rid of the nagging feeling that she forgot something. She stopped to scratch her head through when she hoof bumped into something hard. Crossing her eyes and looking up, she let out a small chuckle when she saw her horn while she was disguised as a pony. She was pretty sure being an alcorn would attract attention. It was not like there was some sort of ancient spell that could turn a pony into an alicorn. Silly me, she said herself as she made her horn vanish. Glad I caught that before anything went wrong. And that is when the great Glamour happened to stop and collapse under her weight. She did not even get a chance to scream before gravity introduced her to the floor. Glamour groaned as she wondered if she could be cursing the fact that her face was slammed into the ground for a second time today. For that, she should be grateful that her face had survived being slammed into the ground for the second time today. Shaking off the pain, she got up and noticed that the room was filled of mirrors mounted to the walls, and further those mirrors were desk filled all sorts of balls and containers, some of which Glamour recognized as makeup. Glamour breathed out a sigh of relief. An empty dressed room meant that the show was about to start, and she was not too far from it. As soon as she opened the door to peek outside, the sounds of electronic music filled the air. It was pretty catchy, but nothing memorable. It was important that it gave her something to follow. Following the sounds, she passed by a few ponies, but they barely gave her more than a glance. She would pretend to be a busy worker hurrying down the hall. The music eventually led Glamour to the backstage area of the fashion show, and what she found her made her eyes shut wide open. Glamour had worn a few outfits in her disguise. She found most of them were uncomfortable and stiffing. There were still a few that she did like, and she expected the fashion show to at least have some stuff that would capture her interest. She was disappointed. Glamour rubbed her eyes in hopes that it was just her accent face plant giving her hallucinations, but she was met with her same disappointment. A bunch of models was all standing around, getting ready for the show, but it was not the models themselves that made Glamour question the sanity of ponies. It was what they're wearing. There was ponies in dresses that made look like a giant ball of hooves. Around was bogged down by so many bells with whistles. There were actually bells and whistles on her dress, and one pony looked like a blimp, in little sense, and not saying she was actual fact that she even made up of iron would be found in the hotel bathroom. But Glamour had admitted that the particular piece somehow worked. Almost every pony donned a glamour glam, that Glamour could only describe as outrageous. Fortunately, there were few designers that gone with the more normal look. They were way better. In Glamour's opinion, there were one particular that stood out of her. In the back, a model wearing an elegant dress and an extra white mare, which Glamour assumed that was a design, was putting on the finishing touches. The dress was mostly white in color, but in multiple layers throughout it, and the edge of the layers was untied purple. It was a purple design, but it made for a remarkable flowing effect. To Glamour, it was the favorite dress of all the bunch. There was a flurry of activity when another pony came in, announcing that the show was about to start. The models immediately lined up in front of the closed curtain. When the few designers still present either headed into the audience seats or wandered off somewhere else backstage. With every pony's attention on the models, Glemma found out of a place to decide where she could observe the show while still remaining inconspicuous. She could not help but being a little excited on how she's going to find see what all the fuss was about. Looking onto on stage, Glimmer could see the runway where the Mars will be able to be walking down. There was must happen at least 100 lights shining down the platform, but ponies were crowding around it. But it was not a big crowd due to it being a rehearsal, but Glamour could clearly see her excitement. A moment later, the curtains opened, revealing the models to the stage. The models had then marched forward and lined up in the stage, and then the sound of the audience stomping her hooves in applause. After a brief introduction by the announcer and another round of applause, the models started taking turns walking down the runway. Doing a few poses when they got to the end of it, and then walking back to their fellow models. Glimmer already got a good look at the appearance of the models backstage, but seeing them on stage under the spotlight was another thing. Even some of them walked with a sense of grace and confidence, and the bright lights only seemed to accentuate their beauty. She was further impressed with the strength of some of them. Such a couple on the dresses looked heavier than the pony wearing it. As the show went on, Glamour could sense adoration growing in the air. They were nuts enough to make a decent meal now. They would only be a lot more ponies than on the actual show day. All the duration would be more than enough to feed one changeling. She started to wonder if there's a way she could exploit that opportunity. Hello? Glamour gave a small jump and turned to another find and make of the dress she liked staring at her. Hi there, Glamour replied. Up close, she could only see the man with a purple color tie together by a red ribbon. Her cutie was a purple wide brim hat and a red feather. One her on her two-tone cyan mane was a heartpin with a shape of a flower with red petals and a purple center. Oh, I'm sorry if I startled you. You work here, right? Yes, I do. I'm making sure that things are okay in here. Mel opened her mouth to speak again, but her attention was drawn to the stage announcers. And now we have the lovely outfit made by another new designer, Coco Pommel. Glamour looked out to see the model wearing the mare's dress was now strutting down the runway. The bright lights made the dress seem to sparkle, and the model was able to move and pose with ease. Showing off the flowing shape of the dress, Glamour had already liked Coco's dress, and now it was even better than that before. From the looks of things in the audience, the ponies had similar opinions. Looking back in the mirror, she now knew was Coco Pommel. She could only have a small smile was now up, upon her face. Not knowing what to do with the situation, Glamour decided to say first thing on her mind. I like the dress you made. Coco's eyes widened slightly and turned back to Glamour. Oh, thank you. She replied in a small blush on her face. An awkward silence fell between the two. The fashion show was going on, but Glamour's attention was on the odd pony but before. Oh, oh, sorry, I got distracted. Coco said all of a sudden. Some guards were looking for some pony, and I kind of promised to help them. I have you seen anything suspicious? Suspicious? What are you talking about? Glembus asked slowly. They mentioned something about an open vent in the back. Glembus did a mental face of. In her eagerness, she had forgotten to place the grate the grate after getting into the bent. No, I haven't, but I'd be sure to keep an eye out for things, she quickly replied before setting her eyes back on the stage. She tried to focus on the show, but even with her back turned towards Coco, she could almost feel Coco's gaze upon her skull. She suspected that Coco had ever thought her ruse at any moment would turn into her. Did did you realize that it mean did you realize do you really mean it? You like the dress I made? Gamma blinked before nodding at Coco. It's one of my favorites. Sorry if I really had to explain it. I I don't know how to match. I don't know too much about fashion, but I do know that part of the reason is that lots of other clothes was so seem so weird. Not I mean you're good because I don't like the others. Coco giggled. It's alright. I know what you mean. It's kind a lot of desire want to try all kinds of different things in hopes of becoming the next big thing. So it's pretty common to see something weird. So why don't you try something like them? Oh, um, Coco's gaze dropped to the floor. I really don't want to take a risk because this is my first show. The only reason I got in was because somehow I had to drop out at the last minute. It's a chance to put my work on display, and since the first impression can make a big impact, I thought it would just play it safe. I know that tonight was just a practice fun, but I'm so relieved that nobody seems to hate my work. Glamour frowned. Hey, give yourself some more credit. Look at the audience. To they seem to me that they are reacting better than simply not hating it. Coco smiled again. They are, aren't they? Seems that I feel so nervous. This is just all so new to me, but what you just said does help. Hey, you there! The two men turned to see a security guard marching towards them. Glamour gulped when she saw that it was the same guard she was speaking at the front door. All right, Missy, the guard said as he backed Glamour into the wall with a stern look. You're coming with me. What? What's going on? Glamour asked. This man right here tried to get into the building. But she did not have a pass. Now she's have after we found the vent busted open. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what's wrong. Glamour yelled when the guards grabbed one of the hooves and started drag her away. Now come along quietly. We must not have you arrested for breaking an entry. Wait! Coco, the guard halted and looked at Coco. Yeah? She's, um, she's with me. Lemma's eyes widened at the same time when the guard's eyebrow went up. Seriously? You know her? She's somebody I got to help out. Then what? Then why does she not have a pass? Like I said, I forgot it at home. Glamour quickly replied. I did not have enough time to get it back and get it. With no way to contact Coco, I have no other choice but to sneak in. The guard looked at Coco, with who nodded her head quickly, and then back at Glamour. Her eyes narrowed at Glamour, gave a sheepish smile. Fine, whatever. The guard let go of Glamour. I don't get paid enough to deal with this. He pointed a hoof at Coco. But if she causes any trouble, it's going to be on you. Both Coco and Glamour breathed out a sigh of relief when the guard finally left them alone. Thank you, Glamour said. But why did you risk yourself for me? We just met. Well, you really are a nice pony. and it doesn't look like you're trying to make trouble. Even though I was wrong when you sneak in. I thought you were a good pony at heart, but I didn't want you to get in a lot of trouble. Glamour chuckled nervously. Right. A good pony. That's right. So, went through all this trouble just to see a rehearsal? I just arrived in Manhattan. When I found out it was a fashion show, I could not help but to see what it would look like. I figured it would be easier to get into a rehearsal. Well, well, I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Oh, what are my manners? Coco extended her towards Glimmer. I guess you already heard, heard the announcement earlier, but my name is Coco Pommel. I'm J- I mean, not Meg. Glimmer replied, but bumping Coco's hoof with her horn. It's very nice to meet you. Glimmer spent the remainder of the show with Coco as she expected none of the other dresses captured her attention like Coco's. As she was happy to see Coco explain any other fashion questions she had. When the show finally ended, Coco's showed off her generosity by giving her a free ticket to the actual show. The day had been an exhausting one for Glamour. After she received her saddlebag, she flew straight up to a cloud. A smile crept on her face as she started to drift off into a slumber. Even though she had not made much progress in finding a pony to leech love from, she might have found a temporary solution to her food needs, but all of one forefront of her mind was she was watching a fashion show and meeting Coco. May Manhattan was not to be so bad.